for too long. And I have a senior, I have a junior, and I have an 8th grader. And for almost all of their school years, we have been living with culture wars and dealing with policies that have nothing to do with education or the well-being of our students and our teachers. And that, my friends, will change in November.
Hey there, I'm Jesse Fox Mayshark, and this is Headlights, Voices from the Progressive South. Headlights is a production of the Progressive South, a nonprofit media platform dedicated to amplifying progressive voices and values across the southern United States. You can find out more about us, including how to support our efforts, at our website, theprogressivesouth.org. And one thing you can find at the website is a link to sign up for our new forthcoming weekly newsletter. We'll be launching that in the next few weeks with links to everything we talk about here on the podcast, plus other news and information about events across the South. It's free. All you need is an email address. So go ahead and get on the list today. Headlights is returning after a summer break, which we used to work on the newsletter and other forthcoming projects. But of course, the news didn't stop while we were gone. So today I'm going to catch up on some of that. Specifically, some ongoing indicators we've seen across the South of an interesting electoral environment in 2026. Later, in our Arts and Culture segment, we'll take a look at this week's Sidewalk Film Festival in Birmingham, Alabama. But we'll start with last week's elections in Florida, the South's second largest state, which over the past quarter century has shifted from a partisan political battleground to a reliably red state that Donald Trump won by 13 points in 2024. State and federal level offices have received most of the attention this year, and for good reason. The competitive primaries for gubernatorial and Senate seats in many southern states have provided compelling storylines and dramas. And I'll be talking about a few of those in Florida and elsewhere. But I want to start at the local level, in Sarasota County, Florida. That's where the voice you heard up top comes from. That was victorious Sarasota School Board candidate Megan Tenemon last Tuesday, August 18th, thanking supporters at her election night party. Florida held primary elections that day for state and federal offices, along with nonpartisan elections for school board seats across the state. 3 of those were up on the Sarasota County Board, which oversees the education of about 43,000 students. It's a medium-sized district by Florida standards, but it has been notable in recent years as a home base of the conservative activist group Moms for Liberty. The group is known for stoking controversy over school materials and library books, especially those that include discussions of race and racism, LGBTQ people, and sexuality in general. One of its co-founders, Bridget Ziegler, has served on the Sarasota County School Board since 2014. She was initially appointed to a vacant seat by then-Governor Rick Scott, a favor she no doubt owed in part to her husband, Christian Ziegler, a political operative who at the time served on the Florida Republican Party's state committee. Ziegler subsequently won election to a full term later that year, and then was reelected in 2018 and 2022. In 2021, she was one of the 3 women who founded Moms for Liberty, initially organizing parents against COVID-related restrictions in schools. As a conservative cultural backlash built coming out of the pandemic, Moms for Liberty quickly adopted other causes, first targeting the teaching of racial history that they branded as critical race theory, and then broadly aiming at any discussion of or reference to LGBTQ people in school materials. Ziegler was only officially involved with the group in its first year, but she has remained a fierce culture warrior on the school board. After the 2022 elections, the 5-member board was dominated by Ziegler and 3 other conservative members. The district has been roiled by fights over curriculum and book materials, harassment and civil rights policies, and other culture war flashpoints. And its voters, apparently, have had enough of it. Last Tuesday, in elections for 3 open seats on the nonpartisan board, 2 were won outright by more liberal candidates defeating more conservative candidates. In the third race, with 3 candidates, nobody won more than 50% of the vote, so the top 2 candidates will go on to a runoff. But the third-place candidate in that race, Teresa DeWitt, was the only one affiliated with Moms for Liberty. She won 25% of the vote and will not be in the general election. Combined with 2 incumbent moderate members of the board, the election results mean there will be at least 4 members who were elected, promising to bring an end to its culture war politics. Here's how Megan Tenneman summed it up at her victory party.
We are going to go home tonight, and we are going to let out the breath that we have been holding for 10 years. We are going to sleep, and we are going to know that today in Sarasota, we made history, and we told the rest of the state and the rest of the world how education is going to go forward.
Oh, and as for Ziegler, she didn't seek re-election this year, which probably had something to do with a sex scandal that engulfed her and her husband, Christian, in 2024. Christian Ziegler had risen by that point to chairman of the Florida State Republican Party. A woman who was a longtime friend of the couple accused Christian Ziegler of sexual assault. She said that she had engaged in a sexual threesome with both Zieglers before, but one day Christian Ziegler showed up without Bridget and compelled the friend to have sex with him, even though she was intoxicated and didn't want to. Sarasota police investigated the woman's complaint and determined there wasn't enough evidence to charge Christian Ziegler. But the episode revealed enough embarrassing personal details that the state GOP ousted him from his leadership position. Bridget Ziegler's colleagues on the school board, including the conservative ones, also voted to ask her to resign, but she refused and will remain on the board until the new members take office this fall. Her scandal-ridden downfall tracks the decline in influence of Moms for Liberty in the state that gave birth to it. At its peak in 2022, the group counted 30 school board members across Florida. This year, it has endorsed only 15 candidates statewide. 11 of them have either won or advanced to runoffs. Even if they all win, that will be a 2/3 drop in Moms for Liberty school board members in Florida in 4 years. Meanwhile, the LGBTQ advocacy group Equality Florida, which has been one of the Moms' fiercest opponents, announced that 25 of the 31 school board candidates that they supported this year also won or advanced in last week's voting. Joe Saunders, executive director of the Equality Florida Action PAC, said, quote, "Moms for Liberty is in free fall. Communities are fighting back against book bans, curriculum censorship, and the whitewashing of history. Voters from the U.S. Senate and governor's races to school boards and state legislative contests chose pro-equality champions, and we are primed to shatter the conservative supermajorities in the legislature in November," unquote. Sarasota County was not the only blue spot on the Florida electoral map last week. In Orange County, home to Orlando and Walt Disney World, Democrat Angie Gallo defeated Moms for Liberty member Alicia Ferrant to take over as the new chair of the school board. Gallo won 60% of the vote and will succeed Republican incumbent Teresa Jacobs as school board chair. Jacobs did not seek re-election. Equality Florida's PAC and the Southern Poverty Law Center Action Fund both supported Gallo and sent mailers critical of Ferrant. You might remember the Southern Poverty Law Center Action Fund from our 8th episode when we interviewed the Action Fund's political director, Brandon Jones. He talked about their efforts in local elections, including school board races. That episode is linked in the show notes. The win in Orlando was especially significant to its LGBTQ community. The city was the site of the terrible shooting massacre at the Pulse nightclub in 2016. And last year it was targeted by Governor Ron DeSantis, who ordered the erasure of a rainbow-painted crosswalk created in memory of the Pulse victims. DeSantis said the removal was for traffic safety, but the queer community understood it as an extraordinarily petty and mean anti-gay attack from a governor who has made a habit of them. All 4 Orange County school board candidates endorsed by the local Republican Party lost. Democrats also flipped an at-large seat on the city council in Jacksonville, Florida's largest city and one of the largest Republican-dominated cities in the country. Even with the win by Democratic candidate Monet Holder in a special election to complete a term, Republicans control 13 of 19 seats on the city council. But Jacksonville voters elected a Democratic mayor in 2023, Donna Deegan, who will be running for re-election next year. So Holder's at-large win is confirmation that Republican dominance of the sprawling metro government is no sure thing. Holder, who is also Chief Advocacy and Policy Officer for the progressive political group Florida Rising, will have to seek re-election to a full term next year. Speaking of Jacksonville Democrats, the Florida primary election that got everyone's attention last week was Democratic Socialist Angie Nixon's win over retired military officer Alexander Vindman for the Democratic nomination for U.S. Senate. Nixon, a state legislator from Jacksonville, ran to the left of Vindman, a more centrist Democrat who became a prominent face of resistance to Trump during the president's first impeachment in 2019. She will face Republican incumbent Senator Ashley Moody in November. Nixon's platform emphasizes social support, including Medicare for all, free childcare and family and sick leave, a national rent freeze, and a universal jobs program. Like other current progressive candidates, she is not afraid to think big. To pay for the expanded services, Nixon proposes taxing billionaires more, cutting military spending, and getting big money out of politics. And speaking of big money, Vindman's campaign outspent Nixon's by a 17-1 margin, but she still won by double digits, 56% to 44% statewide. Her victory over Vindman has predictably flustered the state's party leaders and major donors, in particular her criticisms of U.S. support for the Israeli military. But Vindman immediately endorsed her and urged his supporters to do the same. It makes for a second Senate race where an underfunded underdog progressive candidate has toppled an establishment favorite this summer, after Abdul El-Sayed's win in the Michigan Democratic primary. The difference is that while El-Sayed is attempting to hold on to a seat currently held by a Democrat, few people think any Democrat has much shot at winning a Senate seat in Florida. For what it's worth, Nixon's attachment to the Democratic Socialists of America appears loose. She only announced that she had joined the group last year, and the DSA has not endorsed her candidacy. Since the election last week, she has said in interviews that she's not a socialist, although, of course, that's what Moody is calling her, in a state where the word carries particular baggage with conservative Cubans and other Latinos. The election will offer a real-life laboratory to analyze the prospects of more progressive versus centrist candidates, at least in Florida. Nixon will be on the same statewide ballot as Democratic gubernatorial candidate David Jolly, a former Republican congressman who left the party in 2018 out of disillusionment with Trump. Among other differences with Nixon, Jolly is a staunch supporter of Israel. He's running against the Republican candidate for governor, the Trump-endorsed Congressman Byron Donalds. It will be interesting to see any differences in the votes for Nixon and Jolly and where they show up geographically and demographically in the state. 12 days before Florida's August election, my own state of Tennessee had its state primary and local county elections. And as in Florida, there were some interesting results. Close to home for me, Democrats in Knoxville flipped a seat to take majority control of the Knox County School Board. Our school boards were nonpartisan for about 20 years, but in 2021, our state legislature allowed local parties to turn them partisan. Heading into this election, Republicans had a 5-4 majority on a closely divided school board here. One of those seats, in a district that includes both urban and rural communities, flipped to Democratic candidate Brandy Jenkins. At the County Democrats' election night party, she told me what the number one issue was that voters talked to her about while she was campaigning.
A lot of people do not support vouchers, and I had a lot of supporters tell me, hey, we usually vote Republican, but I don't agree with a public school board member supporting vouchers. So I think that had a big difference. Also I have 2 daughters in our local schools. I've been very involved in our schools. The community has seen me. My husband's soccer coach of the soccer team. We've always helped out. So I think just being in your community as well.
I thought this was an interesting answer because often in local races, candidates will downplay the significance of bigger picture political issues and insist that voters only care about local needs. But the school voucher program pushed through the legislature by Governor Bill Lee is not universally beloved, especially as a series of reports have shown that vouchers are largely going to families whose children were never in public schools to begin with. They are basically serving as taxpayer-funded reimbursement for the private school tuitions that many voucher families were already paying. Here in Knox County, the support for vouchers by some conservative members of the school board has sparked pushback and protests, in some cases even from within the local Republican Party. And those conservative members will no longer have a board majority in September. The result has caught the attention of both major parties in Tennessee because Knox County is the third largest school system in the state, and had been the largest with a Republican majority on the school board. The two biggest are the heavily Democratic Nashville and Memphis-Shelby County districts. We had another interesting seat flip here on our local county commission. In a traditionally Republican urban-suburban district that has been trending more purple, a Democrat took the seat currently held by the Republican chair of the county commission. The race was interesting because it pitted a young political novice, 29-year-old Brandon Huckabee, against the head of the local chapter of, yes, Moms for Liberty. Huckabee is gay and included photos of himself with his husband in his materials, although it was not a particular focus of his campaign. He was nevertheless subjected to a lot of abuse and anti-gay smears from conservatives online, but he won by an 8-point margin, giving Democrats their fourth seat on the 11-member body. He's the first openly gay member of Knox County Commission. For what it's worth, it was the second election in 2 years where a former head of the local Moms for Liberty chapter lost a race in the same district. Democratic turnout and wins surged across Tennessee during the August 6th election. In Montgomery County, on the Kentucky border and home to Clarksville, Democrats flipped 4 seats to take a majority on the county commission. The commission had been split evenly, with 7 seats each for Democrats, Republicans, and Independents. But after flipping 2 Republican and 2 Independent seats, Democrats will now have an 11-member majority to 7 Republicans and 3 Independents. Democrats also flipped school board and county commission seats elsewhere, including Hamilton County, home to Chattanooga, and Williamson County, the wealthy conservative bastion south of Nashville that's home to both Governor Lee and Senator Marsha Blackburn. Speaking of Blackburn, the septuagenarian conservative firebrand won the Republican Party primary for governor, but maybe by less than she would have anticipated earlier in the year. She had 2 opponents, both seeking to appear as far to the right as her, or more, and she won with a plurality of just 43.6% of the Republican primary votes statewide. Congressman John Rose presented her strongest challenge, winning 33% of the votes. But the third-place finisher, State Representative Monty Fritz, was the more interesting, if also alarming, candidate. He took 23.4% of the vote, the support of nearly 1 in 4 Republican primary voters, with a Christian nationalist platform that included calling for the outlawing of Islam and other non-Christian religions and the execution of women who have abortions. Blackburn will face Democratic candidate Jerry Green, a Memphis city councilwoman, in the November election. Despite some obvious momentum for Democrats in the state, Blackburn remains a strong favorite. Tennessee hasn't elected a Democrat in a statewide race since its last Democratic governor, Phil Bredesen, in 2006. But regardless of the outcome, since Green is also a woman, Tennessee is guaranteed to have its first female governor. And if the winner is Blackburn, we will also have our oldest ever state executive. She turned 74 in June. Combined with other Democratic gains across the South in assorted elections last fall and earlier this year, the potential of competing more in the region has attracted the National Party's attention, at least for now. State and local Democratic parties across much of the South have tended to feel abandoned in recent years, written off by party donors and strategists. But at a conference in Austin, Texas, earlier this month, the Democratic National Committee announced the creation of something they're calling the Southern State Resources Hub. Confronting the reality of population shifts to the Southeast that are going to see northern and western Democratic strongholds losing congressional seats after the next census, party leaders say they understand the necessity of paying attention to the region. As party spokesperson Mia Ehrenberg told Gray Media,
the South is rapidly growing, and we as Democrats need to meet the moment and meet voters where they are and compete everywhere.
Of course, party activists and progressives in the South have heard this kind of thing before, particularly during election years when the party fundraising machines are at full throttle. The DNC says its Southern State Resource Hub is, quote, designed to address years of underinvestment in Southern state parties and give them additional tools for organizing, voter registration, data, fundraising, and communications to compete in a region where the electorate is rapidly changing, unquote. Whether that translates into long-term investment in organizing and empowering local and state parties, well, that remains to be seen. But it's safe to say that the cumulative effect of this year's elections has been to energize progressive voters across the South. We'll see what November brings. The Sidewalk Film Festival returns to Birmingham this week for its 28th year. The celebration of independent cinema and Alabama stories in particular was founded in 1999 by a group of local film enthusiasts. Since then, its recognition has spread far beyond the city and state. It's been recognized as one of the best film festivals in the world by Movie Maker magazine. It has grown into not just a major event on the city's cultural calendar, but a year-round presence in Birmingham. In 2019, the nonprofit that runs the festival established the Sidewalk Film Center and Cinema in the historic Pizitz building in downtown Birmingham. It includes 2 90-seat theaters and a classroom, and screens a range of new and old films. The Film Center is a central location for the festival, of course, but only one venue among many. There are also screenings at the historic Alabama Theater, a movie palace built in 1927, the Birmingham Museum of Art, First Church of Birmingham, the Crest Ballroom, and more. The festival proper runs from Friday, August 28th to Sunday, August 30th, but there are preliminary screenings all week, starting Monday evening. All told, there are dozens of screenings ranging from shorts to documentaries to full feature films. It includes dedicated themed tracks in multiple categories, including the Life and Liberty track highlighting civil and social issues, Black Lens featuring black filmmakers, the Women in Film track for female directors, and the Shout track for LGBTQ films and filmmakers. There's also an Alabama track exclusively for films made in and about the state. You can find the full schedule linked in our show notes. If you happen to be in or around Birmingham this week, there's plenty to see. And that wraps us up for this week. Remember, the Progressive South is a nonprofit media outlet, and you can find information about contributing to our efforts on our website, theprogressivesouth.org. Don't forget to sign up for our new newsletter. Thanks to Bark for our theme music and to Lord Seth the Libertarian for his production work at Barbarian Productions. And thanks to you for listening. We'll talk to you soon.